In this lesson, we're going to use the RotoPaint node and its clone tool to fill in the gaps of our image. Okay, so in between lessons, I've gone ahead and just created a simple rotoscope for all of the different pieces in our image, so you can kind of see how those have been split apart. So an interesting thing about this one is that we have kind of the foreground image here. The bank is here as well as the dock. But then as I move on, this one is only the dock. So we're going to play around a little bit with this image in painting out the dock, because we obviously don't want the dock in both places in our 3D scene. And then of course we have the water here at the end. Okay, so let's just start up here with the sky, because this is going to be a rather easy one to work with. So let's go ahead and drop in a RotoPaint node. Just come up here to your image nodes and choose RotoPaint. And we'll pull it over here and plug that into the Roto node that we used earlier just to get this shape isolated. Now, we could actually use a RotoPaint node for all of this, but I preferred to split it apart by having the Roto node for the basic shape and the RotoPaint node for everything that we're adding in, just to stay a little more organized for myself. But you would definitely be able to do it without using any of those Roto nodes. Okay, so let's come over here and we're going to use the clone tool. So go ahead and grab that. And then you're just going to click over here in this area where you find a feature that you think is something that you want to duplicate. Then we're going to hold down the control key. So you're going to left click, then hold down the control key, then drag your cursor away. And now you'll have kind of this almost like a little shadow behind you where you see it's pulling from. So if I just start painting here, you'll see how I'm able to add more pixels from my existing image by cloning those into place. So I'm just kind of painting along here. But this is a pretty small brush, so maybe let's go ahead and make the brush size a little bit bigger. You can simply highlight that number and then hit the up arrow key, and it'll make that bigger for you pretty quickly. Okay, so let's just go ahead. I'm just control clicking to get this tool positioned the way I want it. Just control clicking to reposition that as I work. And you can see also kind of the feather on this is at a little bit more of an intensity at this larger size. So the clouds are rather easy to paint in simply because they are so repetitive just in their own nature. And because we won't be seeing too much of them in our background, you don't have to worry very much about just getting them completely perfect. You can do quite a bit with just this clone tool, and you don't have to really even worry about going in and smearing or blurring anything that doesn't turn out perfectly, because the clone tool really does a good job with these already pretty puffy and just kind of nebulous clouds. So once you've painted in a good amount of this, I would probably go ahead and just paint down maybe to about right here, just as low as you can get it without it looking too repetitive. Then I would just say you're ready to move on to your next layer. So without you just having to sit here watching me clone this in, one thing I do want to talk about really quickly though is you can see how this area here kind of mirrors this area here. And then there's three really obvious copies of each other. So one thing I like to do to kind of fix those is I'll make this line really long so it's coming from an area that's completely different. And just kind of do something like this just to break up that sameness. Then we can do it again on this side over here. So it just kind of helps to make it feel less like it's very repetitive. Now this looks a lot more like there's just one big piece that isn't all connected with all of those clones. Okay, so instead of you watching me finishing up this whole RotoPaint, let's just move on to the next layer. So, or excuse me, the next node. So if I just move my viewer over here, we've got this second almost pane or plane of this mountain image, and I want to start roto painting in down here a little bit just to get more of this area. So let's go ahead and drop in a roto paint node. Just drop in a second one there, and you definitely want that to be hooked up to your Roto 2, not RotoPaint 1. Okay, and then let's just zoom in a little bit. And go ahead and grab that clone tool. We'll just click and drag out just like we did before. Let's just go ahead and make this bigger right off the bat, that brush size. And then we can just start painting. Really pretty easy. So you're kind of just getting the idea of what this entails. Honestly, it's just a little bit of painting and patience that's going to get this looking the way you want it to be. Now, one thing you can do on different planes like this, different pieces that you've rotoscoped out, is to use actual brush strokes. So what I mean by that is you can kind of see how, all of this is just clone work, but I can choose to paint a color in also. So if I come over here and grab my brush tool, let's just bring that size up again. I can just paint in an area here. And then when we have that brush selected in our RotoPaint tab, we can come over here to the color and just choose that color picker, and then let's just control click to grab the piece we want. And it looks like this brush also as well needs to be control clicked. So we had two there, they weren't combined. So you can paint that way as well if you don't want to clone it. And then you might want to come in with something like your blur, or let's try your smear tool. Make that a little bit bigger. Let's try 55. And then you can just kind of start smearing this around. Maybe switch back over to the blur tool and start softening that up. Let's make that 50, maybe even larger, like 200. Okay, there we go. So now we have this really large blur tool, and I'm just clicking and dragging over and over and over these pieces, and it'll help to just kind of create a layered effect. And I would probably have painted in more than that with my original brush, just to kind of help that along a little bit. So maybe let's just paint in some more here. So let's make this bigger, like about 100 or so. And then we'll just paint in this area here, kind of let this go up. And I'm trying not to let up off my brush so that I don't get too many instances of that brush tool, because the more times you let up off of the brush and click, the more you're going to have to deal with over here in your properties bin for the RotoPaint node. So we'll just try to get away with as few as possible. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Then we can just come in and we'll just control click to assign it a color. It'll take a second. And that looks actually pretty good. We actually covered up this brush 3 that we did, so I can just delete that one. And then again, I would probably just go in with the blur tool and start blurring away down here. Now you want to be careful not to blur along this line up here, because I'm trying to maintain that nice ridge line that we've gone in and carefully rotoscoped. So you may even want to go in with your eraser tool behind your brush tool and turn your hardness all the way down, or excuse me, all the way up to a 1. And then really come in there and just kind of make some of those areas you've painted with a softer brush a little more jagged, just like that. And then you may, again, need to come in there and paint on a little bit more just to make it taller. Just maybe kind of like that. And we'll control click to assign it a color. Then we'll grab that eraser tool again and just kind of wiggle it along that edge so you get that nice kind of jagged feel that this edge has with the trees, but it just matches a little bit better. Okay, so then you can go in and kind of start smoothing that out. Now, let's move over here to Roto 4. Now, I'm not going to take the time right now. I'm going to do it in between lessons, but I'm going to be painting out this bridge. So I want you to play around in between lessons using your clone tool and another RotoPaint node that you'll add onto this roto to paint out this bridge. And then you'll also want to extend, probably your water will be okay. I wouldn't worry too much about painting in more of that. Mostly focus on painting out that bridge and then extending this area here down a little bit in the front, especially on this side over here. And then you can just finish up with this layer and maybe make the sky a little bit longer as well. So a few things to work on in between lessons, dropping in a few more RotoPaint notes. And then we'll pick up in our next lesson with starting to make these different roto shapes feel like they actually have some 3D dimension by using cards. So in this lesson, we learned how we can use the clone tool in the RotoPaint node to add our image so that we see it in 3D space, or when we see it in 3D space, we're not going to have any gaps between the different planes. And then in our next lesson, we'll be pushing those images around in 3D space. Now, one more thing that I want you to remember that's very important is if, let's say I'm looking at this RotoPaint 2, let's just click forward in our timeline here. You notice that this disappears. So what's happening is our brushes here, all of the different things that we've created inside of that RotoPaint node have a life of 1 frame. That's what you see right here. So what we need to do is tell these to last the entire time of our timeline. So you'll just select this bottom one down here, then come all the way up to the top and hit Shift to select all of them. Then just come over here to Lifetime, and instead of Lifetime type single frame, choose all frames. And you can see how that changes to all. And now that piece is going to come back. And you want to do that with everything you paint. But I would probably finish that up in between lessons as well, because you're going to be painting more. And all you have to do basically to know if it is set wrong for a layer is to see what that life says over here. So you can just quickly scroll through and see if they say all or not. And you'll also want to go ahead and do that for RotoPaint 1, but you may be painting more on those, so just wait until you finish it up to add that step in. But you definitely want to do that just so your roto shape looks great over time. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson. We'll have the rest of these RotoPaint nodes finished, and we'll start pushing these layers, or excuse me, planes around in 3D space.